This is Mile High.
Do I want to tell the story or do I want to show the message?
You've got a lot of work to do between Mile High.
The time has come where we can know
we have a responsibility, an ethical and moral responsibility.
We have to do it better in order to move people along.
Up, down, inside out.
If you get your mind right, it is not. It is a receiver of thought. Because love is my first technique.
It's now time for the show.
Welcome to the Mile High Podcast. This is your host, Dr. Daniel Knowles, and we are grateful to have you listening and watching on whatever channel you are listening and watching on, whether it be Stitcher, YouTube, iTunes, Facebook, whatever. And wherever it is, we really insist or encourage you to hit the subscribe button. You don't want to ever miss any Mile High tech, nor do you want to miss Mile High itself. You want to make sure to dial in, being there August 20th to 23rd, 2020. It is the Roaring 20s. There's not too many dates that have 2020 in it. And so we look forward to seeing you there. Make sure you grab your seats if you have not. www.milehighchiroregistration.com. And I am so thrilled to introduce our guest today, who is going to be a speaker at Mile High. She'll be on stage at Mile High, Dr. Tamara MacIntyre. She's an internationally recognized authority in chiropractic care. She's a former dean of clinical education at a chiropractic institution. She's been touted as a clinical genius, which is why I'm so thrilled to talk to her, because I love having clinical conversations and upgiving people knowledge. And she's really a role model for so many people as female healthcare providers. So Dr. Tamara MacIntyre, welcome to the Mile High Podcast.
Thank you so much, Danny. I'm really excited to be here.
Well, we're excited to have you here. And let's start out with helping people get to know you better personally. Like, how did you find your way into the chiropractic world?
Sure. I really had a lot of experience within the medical model and had sort of some family health related issues, and found myself sort of navigating that with my dad. And then, a few years later, ended up having some health issues myself. And one of the things that was staggeringly obvious was that that healthcare model was really about whatever the blah, blah, blah was, and not really about the person. And so when I had some of my health issues, of course, I, ended up in a chiropractor's office, because part of it was a neurological issue. And ended up in Chiropractic College, not having a ton of experience, but just this small little window, and having met a lot of chiropractors that absolutely loved what they did, and they just embodied it. And I thought, that's what I would like to do with my life. And so really, I would say chiropractic, what attracted me was really the philosophy and the manner with which it was applied as a person-to-person connection model. And so that's how it all started. It was really just my small personal experience and my trust in those chiropractors that taught me what they taught me.
That's really beautiful. And what I understand that is also beautiful is right now you have a new direction, a new venture. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you're up to?
Yeah, absolutely. So my wife and I, so Dr. Monique Andrews, who some of the listeners may know as Dr. Mo knows, and I started a foundation. So we left California, we moved back to Canada, and when we left, it was this really, a friend said, there's such a unique opportunity. There's not a whole lot of times when you get to go, where am I now and where do I want to go? And so we sat down and went, what are the things that we've been working towards in our lives and in our careers that we're the most passionate about? And being part of the student's experience and knowing new docs was where really for both of us we thrived. And so when we had to make a decision on what was the next thing, it was, where is our passion? And our passion is in the education piece. And so it was this really beautiful creative experience. Years and years ago, Dr. Guy Riekman had taught us about storyboarding. And so we went right back to our foundation and went, okay, let's storyboard out what we love to do. And so that's where the foundation came from. And it basically has 3 pillars, which is really 3 things that we're really passionate about. And so one is education. We each have different sort of emphasis, but we're both really passionate about people owning information and understanding it. And the second piece is service, because so much of the model of chiropractic that we were brought up in foundationally is that we are providing an incredible service to humanity, and that's at all different levels. And so our service to students, our service to the profession, and it's not just about student, service trips, which unfortunately when you say service, sometimes that's kind of the bigger umbrella. While we do some retreats, service is really about that human exchange. And then the third part is mentorship. And I think we're kind of living in a time where there has been a coaching model and a practice management model, and we've got a generation that whose value system is a little bit different. And so, the difference between seeing somebody on a stage and seeing them as their role model, but actually having somebody know you incredibly well and help pull out those things that define who you are so that you can meet your own goals and nobody else is defining them for you. That mentorship piece is huge. And so for both of us, the foundation really stems from that education, service, and mentorship. So that's really our goals.
Well, that's really exciting. And the people, what's the URL, the website where people can find out more about?
The pranafoundation.org. And then we also have a private Facebook group that we're really, looking to build that community. And that allows us to have, different types of conversations. We do a live Q&A every couple weeks. And the topics that we cover are sensitive ones sometimes. We just talked about associateships and that the amount of interaction that we got from students and actually docs who are struggling trying to find associateships ended up being a huge, big topic. But we cover topics that tend to be a little bit more vulnerable, a little bit more tender, so create that safe space. And so we do those every couple weeks, and we're just getting ready to do some complimentary webinars for that community.
Well, and I've got to say, I really enjoy the things that I've seen in there, so I highly recommend people join that group.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, once you, at first, there's a stepping place of, ooh, can I be a mentor? Will people want to listen to what I have to share?
Yeah.
And then there's a place that you do it a little bit, then you get the mentorship bug. You're like, oh, I really enjoy what I get back out of this from giving to others in terms of the reward sense of like, this is really wonderful to help someone else. So I would think that some of that mentorship bug came out of working with students. So being a clinic director, what did you gain or learn about working with students?
Oh, so much. I think, there's not enough emphasis on the vulnerability that happens in those early moments of standing over a table with someone. And so, the education is kind of built in threes, right? So you get like your science 101, and then the second year, you're basically learning your, chiropractic doctoring 101 skills. And then it's like there's just this really big jump and leap between I've done seminars, I hope I've done enough, I hope I am enough. And then, I hope I can help somebody, and I hope I end up being that kind of chiropractor that that motivated me to become one. And I think, there's not enough I think a lot of them really feel like there's a fall, that sort of fake it till you make it, like that only brings you so far. Mm-hmm. And they need this space to say, this is what I know, this is what I don't. And it's okay to be afraid. Like we all felt like that. And so, for me, I really look to design and redesign the manner with which that learning happens, because you can't have somebody standing and talking in front of you. You need to be meeting the student where they're at. You need to create that space where they can come when they're scared, when an interaction hasn't gone the way that they had hoped, when, they're really not even sure what they need. They just know it's not feeling like those pieces are coming together. And so it was just an enormous, enormous gift to actually meet students in that space and help bring out who they are as a chiropractor based on their definition, not based on mine. I loved that so much. And then the reward of watching them on the other side make that come to fruition is huge.
Yeah, I'll tell you from my personal experience, I've taught people technique. I remember the first time doing that being super nervous.
Yeah.
and feeling much more comfortable. I've done it for 15 years or something.
Yeah.
And then being involved with Sherman and being on the board and being like, well, why are they asking me? Like, what do I have to offer? You know,
Yeah.
and then realizing when you, especially meeting with students on campus, like, wow, I actually do have a lot to offer here. And you see so much stuff where students and doctors have gotten really bad advice. And you know, you like you don't want them to have this, and maybe you have too. I certainly had at points. You know,
Yeah.
you don't want people to make the same mistakes.
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, I feel like the environment that our new docs are graduating in has changed a lot since when I was there. And there was a lot of altruistic focus and giving from our profession when it came to philosophy and giving that kind of, scaffolding where it's like, well, who you are as a person precedes who you are as a chiropractor. And yes, there's a certain amount of personal growth that, you need to have done as you go into that vulnerable kind of space. But those philosophy nights, and there's so much more emphasis on technique than the actual working with and figuring out all of those other aspects of assessment and of philosophically, where do you stand and where does our profession stand? And it's okay to, to do that exploration. And so I think a lot of those kind of pieces have changed the environment that they're in. And I think the education has changed in a way in that it's being delivered in a manner with which this generation doesn't use information.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
that's a big thing, actually. Yeah, that's a big
it
gap.
really is. And something I would like to hear more about, and probably our audience does too, is what's been your, I will use the lack of a better word, upbringing. What's been your upbringing? Who mentored you, inspired you in chiropractic?
Yeah. So I know now that my environment of becoming a chiropractor was really unique. So I went to Palmer College in Davenport, Iowa. Virgil Strang was the president at the time. He was my philosophy 101 teacher. So I spent, my first trimester with him. And then he passed away. And so we were without that leadership. And of course, when you're new, you don't necessarily know a whole lot. I was learning about the politics of Palmer and its closed door policy for a long time. And, I chose the school really from an academic perspective more than I actually chose the school having a sense of the profession. And so,
right.
To my very good fortune, Dr. Guy Riekman came in, and he made such a big difference for me, and I still am very good friends with him. And what happened when he took over was that the doors opened. And so what that meant was I actually, Monique and I picked Reggie Gold up from the airport. All of the people in our profession, Fred Barge was my philosophy teacher. I gave tours of BJ's house. Alana Callender, who's, really sort of the historian for our profession, and runs, the museum and the journal and all of those kind of things. She and I worked together because I gave tours and I was part of an organization that pretty much anybody that came on campus, I got to give them a tour at that time. So, I met Chester Wilkes. I, met some of these big name players and got the chance to actually just sit down and talk to them. And I think that made a really, really big difference because I feel like I am intimately connected to this profession from its foundation, from its core. We made up a club, Monique and I and a group of our friends, and Palmer had bands at the time. And so we would go to the Sherman Lyceums and the triunes that they had back then. And so we would go and we would rent the van. We would drive from Davenport, Iowa, all the way to Spartansburg and bill it with other students and play around and have conversations philosophically and technique based. And that's where I met Donnie. The first time that I, saw Donnie stand was, now if I date myself, over 20 years ago, talking about a different model of chiropractic, listening to Joe Strauss, listening to Reggie, listening to Val Panaccio, listening to Tom Gilardi. Like those are the people that formed who I am as a chiropractor. And the person that really from a skill set perspective, Sue Brown was such a close, dear friend of mine, and I would not be who I am as a chiropractor had I not been immersed in the profession in that way when I was developing.
Yeah, yeah. You know, we have a lot of the same influences. Val Panaccio is my philosophy teacher, and it was
Yeah.
the first semester that or quarter that she
Yeah.
had ever taught philosophy. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so I really actually challenged her quite a bit because I'm
Totally.
really outspoken. But we had a
Yeah.
lot of fun. She was so influential in my life.
Yeah, and that was the environment that I was in too, where you would inquire and you would challenge and you would sit in the student lounge, and, you know, whoever was around campus would come and sit down, and we'd have, you know, an hour long, you know, or more chat, just sitting around talking about the things that were whatever a student's mind is struggling with in a given moment. And that was all outside of technique. That was all about how you made a decision associated with how you wanted to apply chiropractic in your practice.
So let's I want to ask something a little bit more of a clinical nature, a
Yeah.
little deeper in chiropractic art and science.
Yeah.
So what are some things? There's this term that I'm really fascinated by and very focused on, and I put at the center point of a lot of what I do, and
Yeah.
which is clinical excellence.
Yes.
I get very saddened when I look around at what we see chiropractically. I'm not talking a particular technique by any means,
Right.
but the level that chiropractic is delivered,
Totally.
and what it could be,
Yeah.
right? And also the level of collaboration it could be.
Yeah.
How do you see or define, or what do you see as clinical excellence?
In its shortest answer, we always talk about chiropractic as a three-legged stool. I mean, you kind of have to start there. And so it is a science, it is an art, and it is a philosophy. And the strength in our ability to communicate chiropractic from all of those perspectives is critical. And so when you see what's happening, you know, let's take Canada, for example, you know, when you look at what's happening as far as the challenges, so much of the public is only exposed to, to its science and to a very narrow focused scope, which takes us away from who we are as chiropractors, you know, in its core. So clinical excellence for me is not just the application of technique. You know, I always say the magic of chiropractic is not about delivering or the mechanics of an adjustment. It's in the care of the patient. And and that means, you know, the luxury of going into your own intuition happens when you actually have spent the time on foundational knowledge. So, you know, having somebody come into a college and tell somebody that you don't need the science. Well, the science informs the art, informs the philosophy, and congruency and clinical excellence for me is when all of those pieces in the manner with which you are communicating chiropractic, practicing chiropractic, and delivering the, you know, in that model of care. Clinical excellence needs the weight of all of those pieces. It's not just, you don't get to just choose to heavily focus on one, because you'll very quickly realize that's where struggling happens, I think, in practice, is when you don't realize that there's a lot of different areas that build that clinical excellence in a deliverable ease that allows you to be whoever you want to be as a chiropractor. So clinical excellence for me is all of those pieces, and being mindful of how they come together. And so you're right, it's not about technique. And does the way you're communicating chiropractic, is it congruent with the way you're delivering chiropractic? Is it, are you having those conversations with patients on a regular basis from a patient education and from our paradigm, or are you wasting time talking about the weather?
Right.
There's a lot of those pieces. Like, mastery happens with time. Mastery happens with practice. You don't graduate from chiropractic college as a master. The idea that, you are going to deliver this masterful adjustment. The adjustment doesn't happen in the delivery of any level of force. It happens in that moment and continues as somebody leaves the table and goes into their life, as their body continues to adjust and adapt to the feedback that was given, that innate can actually do something with. So mastery is the acknowledgement of all of those pieces.
Beautiful, beautiful. I love it. And I want to see more of that in chiropractic. That's one of the things why I put on Mile High, is to have a home for that people, get exposed to that kind of thinking. And again, another reason why I'm very thrilled to have you join us at Mile High this year.
That's what's so important about events like Mile High. It's not, it's people from all different parts of our profession. It's learning to actually, rely on each other's expertise. But when the philosophy and the framework and the patient education, it's not confusing to refer a patient to another chiropractor for a consult. It's not confusing to actually reach out to some of our colleagues when that's their strength, and for them to know what ours are. And I think that has to be cultivated at the very beginning of this profession. I think it's really difficult when somebody, develops an isolation kind of model or a limited view of practice. Then, of course, they see another chiropractor as competition as opposed to a colleague,
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Dr. Tamara, who is Dr. Tamara? So if we want people to get to know you better and your identity and what you feel you're bringing through Prana, the Prana Foundation, as opposed to your counterpart, Dr. Mo knows, what does Dr. Tamara know and bring?
I think my magic happens in being able to pull those pieces together. So when we talk about clinical excellence, I think, I'm an info gatherer. I mean, I am an academic at heart, but I think what is sort of my expertise is for that to be so solidly grounded in chiropractic philosophy, focused on meeting somebody where they're at in that struggle and in that vulnerability, and, providing them with the confidence until they own it themselves. I think that's really where my expertise lie. I'm really comfortable creating a safe space for that vulnerability to be expressed.
So you had a conversation we just mentioned about being there's an associate conversation, which I'm sure people would like to see what happened with that in that group, so they should join the group. Associateships, there's lots of good. There's lots of not so good. I'm sure you could say there's the good, bad, and ugly, right?
Totally.
Like there is in everything else in life.
Exactly.
Right? Yes. So, what are some things that you think create wins for both the associate doctor and the senior doctor or clinic?
Communication, number one. I think that, the associate doc that's hiring needs to understand that while they possess enormous amounts of valuable experience, it's not just about another new doc coming in to observe, or that they're going to, or the expectation that they're going to practice exactly as you do. And the manner with which you communicate, having training videos instead of sitting down with a doc for, an hour and a half a week and inundating, or not having a procedures manual is a really big issue for somebody coming in. So I think communication and having reasonable expectations, if you actually look at the statistics, millennials have classically, and I'm always super hesitant to use the word because I actually really love millennials. I love their value system, but they historically are not staying in jobs more than 2 years. So I think an associate doc needs to recognize, while they would love to imagine that they're bringing somebody in that's going to love exactly what they do it exactly like they do, and stay forever, is not realistic. Mm-hmm. And on the other hand, you've got newer graduates that are, one of the things that they also say is that this generation tends to be overconfident in their competence. And sometimes that's misperceived, and some of that's just protection and not actually even really knowing how to ask for what they need. But they're going into associates and looking at, these opportunities as, their dream practice. But communication and what that's going to look like, or what their expectations are, asking for the mentorship that they need, being comfortable saying, here's my strengths and here's what I need some help and support. Is that something that you can do for me? I think that's really important. So I think the win happens when the associate is going into these relationships with a very realistic expectation of where they're at, where they desire to be, and what are the steps that it's going to take to get them there. And are they going into an environment where there's that consent to do that with them, and then, I think that that's actually, where some of the gap is they see the dream practice, they see the doc successful, and they imagine that that's exactly who they want to be, but they don't have a good sense of what it took to get there. And it's not just about, business coaching. It's not just about the dollars. It's about, an associate coming in and recognizing that they're looking for experience and they're looking for service, and that's their value system. But they also need to make a living wage,
Right.
So $20 an hour when they're carrying $200,000 to $300,000 debt, that's not going to create financial stability very quickly.
Right. Right. Yes. So now, what you said actually brought me to something that you said was your favorite quote, because I think it actually really illuminates the associate conversation, which is you said, and we'll put this in the podcast notes along with the links to your group and your page, so people don't have to get cause any subluxations and write things down while they're listening. Awareness is like the sun. When it shines on things, they are transformed. I think an associateship gives a huge opportunity to bring some awareness to someone that they can gain quicker in terms of their learning curve.
Very much so. Yeah. I mean, that's, we're not a profession that does residencies, right? And a lot of the programs that are in place when a student meets their graduation requirements or finishes their graduation requirements in another office, they're typically going in as staff. And they actually are going in thinking it's going to be practice. And so, if they're going in with the awareness that this is an opportunity for them to see what they like, see what resonates with them, see where they're challenged, I think that would change where, and what they decide to do when they, potentially move on from that environment. But I think transformation happens when you are aware and you're observing. And so just being really, I think it's important to have those conversations that, when you graduate from chiropractic college, there is still much learning to be done.
And I'd like to take that another step forward, because I just love that quote so much. How can you share what you think that quote has to do with the subluxation and the adjustment?
Oh, gosh, Danny. The body has cellular memory. If you go right back to, the old school book that, was our reading 20 years ago, when we were learning from James Oshman and we were talking about energy medicine and we were talking about that level of awareness, the subluxation is not just a biomechanical entity. And, when you sit and listen to Monique talk about, the areas of the brain that are impacted by the chiropractic adjustment are the same areas that are associated with consciousness. They are executive function. They are our quality of life. And so, awareness happens at so many different levels. And so that is an energetic awareness, that is a consciousness component and spirituality. And I think when you're under and have been under chiropractic care and been in the chiropractic community for as long as you and I have, there is something far more significant that we should be talking about besides pain and discomfort.
Yes.
And so that level of awareness and actually being honest about that conversation, that we have the capacity to check in with our body on so many different levels. And when we're working with the human frame, we're working with so many different levels that we can bring awareness to in that individual who's on our table. And I think we bear the responsibility to be having that conversation. I think it's woefully deficient and actually irresponsible to be having any other conversation, as it relates to body awareness and where healing happens in the body's innate ability to take care of itself when it has that facilitation,
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, and I agree. And that's where, innate shines light on the rest of the body.
Absolutely it does. Absolutely it does. And it just gives that beautiful window to check in with self and allow the body to do what it knows how to do. It's, that classic, it's not what's wrong in the body, it's what's right. And that's what we're illuminating, is bringing that awareness and allowing the body to actually connect with itself in a manner with which healing happens.
Well, and I got to say this, we are so grateful to have you share this kind of presence at Mile High. And actually, I'm almost, no, I do remember this. You were at Mile High as an attendee 2 years ago. What did you love about that?
I love the energy. I love the openness. I love the supportive nature of the environment. I think there's just so few environments now that create that space where it is so not about technique, it's about who we are as chiropractors in its core, essential component, who we are from a paradigm, who we are from our philosophy. Mile High, you and Rochelle have done such a brilliant job of creating that space to celebrate who we are as chiropractors and be able to find people like you that are wanting to be that mentor.
Well, thank you for saying that. I mean, it takes a lot of intentionality. My friend Arnaud said that. He said, there's a lot of intentionality to create the way this rolls out. So
Totally.
that you picked up on that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, everything down to the consciousness of who has a booth and what the services look like, and not allowing monetary support to come any other place besides congruent
Right.
businesses, congruent chiropractors, supportive, and that's what I mean by the support is who are the people we should be supporting, because that's where we need to focus as well.
We need to be aware that a lot of times in chiropractic, we've been completely unconscious as a profession.
Absolutely.
So,
yeah.
Well, I want to thank you again for being on the podcast. We're so thrilled. I am so thrilled to have you at Mile High.
Thank you, Dan. Can't wait.
August 20th to 23rd. And I've got to tell you, seriously, the posts that are in the Prana group, I've seen them and watched them. I highly recommend people check it out. And again, we'll put the links for that in that when the blog post comes along with this. So thank you so much. We look forward to seeing everybody on Higher Ground, August 20th to 23rd. And keep changing spines and lives and minds with chiropractic.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Danny.
Thank you.